Well, I'm going to introduce the next speaker, Dr. Michael Leahy.
Well, that's Michael Leahy yesterday, but I won't object. Thank you very much for your warm welcome. And with all of the fear-mongering and all of the despondency we get fed by government and our media, it's wonderful to see such a fantastic crowd out who are prepared to come out to stand up for the rights and liberties of the Irish nation. When I hear the cry for freedom, I think we picked the right name for the organisation I'm involved with, which was formed some years ago as a direct response to the attacks against freedom that have been going on for some time, but which have come to a head over the last 2 to 3 years. Why are we here today? The reality is that people are finally beginning to wake up. They know there is something very, very seriously wrong with our state and with our politics. This is no longer just about COVID, and it's no longer just about lockdown. This is about the corruption of our freedoms and our democracy and our society, and we can't let that happen. If we do not win this fight to protect our most basic rights and freedoms, if we do not push back against government, if we do not push back against media and against the powerful elites which try to enslave us, then I am afraid that we may enter into a very, very dark age from which many of us may never emerge. We are here today to send a message, the strongest possible message to government, that we will not go gently into the dark night of serfdom, but we will fight like Irish men and Irish women to protect the rights of our forebears established for us. Does anyone believe that the system of apartheid which has been introduced into our country is a temporary measure which will be rescinded in October? When they introduced the initial restrictions, we were told that they were to last for a short time to let the hospitals get ready. But instead of that short term being extended from 3 weeks now to 1.5 years, as long ago as last April, 12 months, I remember demanding an end to the lockdown and predicting that if it wasn't reined in, that we would shortly have vaccine passports. At the time, we were condemned as conspiracy theorists. Well, I don't know if it's a conspiracy or not, but it certainly isn't a theory. It's now a fact, and a horrible fact. Does anybody believe that the vaccine passport system will stop at the hospitality industry? It will gradually be extended into every aspect of our lives, and it won't be just about vaccinations. Digital internal passports have the potential to form the foundation of an unprecedented surveillance and control system into which the lives of all of us will be tied, including health records, banking and credit scores. It has all the hallmarks of being the precursor of the odious and horrible social credit system of the Chinese Communist Party. And if we do not stop it now, it has the potential to enslave us for generations to come. When our government attempts to introduce a modern technocratic system of slavery, we must say to them that our forebears fought for 300 years to bring an end to slavery in this country, and we're not going to let them introduce it by another name. Does anyone believe that when this government has legislation on the statute books allowing a massive and unprecedented expansion of police powers because of an entirely exaggerated crisis, that they will not immediately find another crisis in order to justify the retention of those powers? The viral crisis will shortly morph into a climate crisis, and that will morph into a racial crisis or a gender crisis. And all these crises will be used to justify the dreadful attacks against freedom of assembly and freedom of speech, which, as we speak, are before the dawn at committee stage. If we do not have free speech in a society, we can in no way describe ourselves as a free society. Perhaps our generation has come to regard freedom as a natural condition of society. It is anything but. It was hard won, and we owe it to those who won it for us to fight hard to retain it. if we allow a gang of unscrupulous elites to determine what we can and cannot say in public, and even in the privacy of our own homes, then the great struggle for Irish liberty, which has taken place and whose 100th anniversary we celebrate next year, has been a struggle in vain. We must let government, both national and European, know that the Irish people will never accept that. Are we going to allow it to be said that the Irish nation lasted for only 100 years? When I see you here today, I know that we will not allow that to be said. There can be no doubt that just as the individual is tested by adversity, so the people of a great nation is tested by its ability to react to external or internal attacks. There can no longer be any doubt that the Irish nation is under attack both from international forces and also from the corruption of its own institutions. This generation will be tested in the same way as previous Irish generations were tested. Those generations showed their mettle, and we can take example from them. It is now up to us to show that the Irish spirit, the Irish commitment to liberty, is still alive and will never be extinguished, save in the words of Patrick Pearse, by the extinction of the Irish nation. We have a fight in our hands, and like all fights it won't be easy, but if they want the fight, they can have it. All of us have come here today because we realise the dangers that we face. We are beginning to realise that the institutions of this state, the courts, the churches, the media, the elected representatives, and most notably the presidency, no longer have the interests of the Irish people at heart. In many ways, the state, which has overreached its powers, is now rapidly becoming an enemy of the Irish people and of the Irish nation. For the past 30 years or more, the institutions of this once democratic nation have been whittled away, whether by membership of the European Union, by the undermining of our pride in our history and our culture, by the handing over of excessive powers to financial and multinational elites, and by the gradual demoralisation of our people through the destruction of our own private domains, such as family, loyalty, even private conversations and private friendships. People are now waking up, certainly, but it's not enough to know that there is something wrong. It is not enough to notice in the present lockdown that it is the weakest who are hit the hardest. It is the people with the least to lose who are losing the most, whether in the destruction of businesses, the loss of employment, the loss of property rights, the loss of adequate healthcare and education, or in destruction of the social lives of our youths. And when the enormous sums of money that are being needlessly squandered by present policies come to be paid back, who do you think is going to pay the cost of the so-called Great Reset? It will be the ordinary families, struggling as always to support themselves against the predations of government. It is simply inconceivable that any government can willingly inflict so much damage on its own country, and it only makes sense when you realise that our democratic institutions have been effectively gutted from within. That elected representatives are quite happy to hand over a government to non-elected bureaucrats with no capacity for government and no concern for the people's interests. Well, it's time we said to the government that when you attack the people's interests, there is a price to be paid, and the time is coming when the people will demand that you pay that price. Last year, I spoke on the steps of the Custom House and said that we still had a chance and that the courts might yet vindicate our rights and call the government to its senses. The courts have had adequate opportunity to adjudicate in those matters, but they have stood in their hands instead of adjudicating on the most important matter ever to come before them. We have to ask now, do we have a constitution or do we not have a constitution? Because if the courts allow the government to get away with this, then clearly we do not. If the courts will not stand up for the liberties that the Irish people established through 300 years of sacrifice and struggle and blood and suffering, then the courts are not fit for purpose and they must be swept aside and replaced with a new system that will protect us. I believe we are now coming to the most serious constitutional crisis we have faced since independence. It may be that we need a new constitutional system to protect us, and if we are to establish it, we must go about establishing it, and we must use the lessons that we have learned from Irish history, from our noble struggle to establish liberty in this country. That is what will give us the basis for a new constitutional system. We need to be active and on the streets. We need to have mass meetings such as these in every town and every country and every day and night of the week. We need to let those in power know we are a free people and we will remain a free people. This is a great and historic nation, and we will not let that nation perish from the face of the earth. That is the lesson of Irish history, and that is a lesson that our masters would do well to remember. I know that at times it can seem to be faced insurmountable odds. You will read nothing of this rally in the newspapers tomorrow, and you will hear nothing of it in our mockingbird media. But we must say to the state, we are coming! It is not you who will destroy us, it is we who will destroy you. We are coming to demand justice for Ireland. We are coming, and there is no power on earth that will stop a unified and risen people when it is awakened. We must seek in whatever way we can to frustrate the operation of the odious and immoral internal passport system and of the other egregious attacks against our ordinary civil and religious liberties. I conclude only by thanking you for coming out in such great and enthusiastic numbers today, and I ask you to continue to stand by our country, to stand by our nation, to stand by the Irish Republic, and to stand by God Almighty for the rights and liberties of the Irish people.